Hi there, welcome back to the dojo. I am Russ Leach, I'm the comic book black belt, and this is one of a series of videos where I'm going to talk about this book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. There are lots of books out there that profess to be able to teach you how to draw comics, and a lot of them are really good. But this is the daddy. This is the book. If you've got one book to teach you how to draw comics, or to help you how to draw comics, this is the one you should have. It's not perfect, but it is very, very close. It also has one of the finest artists ever to grace comics, John Buscema, drawing within its pages, and Stan Lee writing the book. Now, I was very fortunate to be involved in Draw the Marvel Way, which is similar in its approach. I put in there my hints, tips, tutorials of how to draw the Marvel characters. I've been blessed with being able to draw a ton of Marvel characters for Marvel within these pages, and it was 100 issues over just over 4 years. There were some other extremely talented people involved in the book, and it really is a good book in my personal opinion, but it still has not got a patch on this one. So what this series of videos is me effectively going through all the sections, all the lessons, all the chapters of this book, giving you some examples of my artwork that I feel that I've improved, or I've benefited from this book, and how that works for me. And in the chapters where you draw along, I'll be doing some drawings, and hopefully you can draw along with me, and hopefully it'll be of some use to everyone out there, and if nothing else, it'll be an advert for you to go out and buy this book. I'm using a PDF that I got from an educational download. I will put the link to that PDF in the description for each video in the series, but I can't instill enough in you. Go and buy this book and put it on your desk, because it's an absolute must-have. So without further ado, I'll get on with this episode. So, chapter 12. Let's just soak in this fantastic image that we've got going on here. Look at the balance of blacks and whites in here. Just superb stuff. And we'll be going on now. So I'll read through. And I'll pick out some bits and pieces as discussion points, and then I'll show some examples at the end of my own work. No matter how beautifully a page may be drawn in pencil, it cannot be printed in a comic book unless black India ink is applied to the original pencil drawing. That's obviously out of date. But if you're doing work traditionally, if you're not doing work digitally, it's still the same deal. It's just a matter of how you apply the ink. Lots of people use pens now as well as brushes and ink pens. That means someone has to trace over the initial penciled artwork with either a paintbrush or drawing pen, transforming each illustration into a carefully inked final product. That word tracing, that does down inkers. Some inkers, and it also depends on the pencils as well. I mean, if you've got very detailed finished pencils, then an inker really doesn't have very far to go with their own expression. They can literally just trace over the top of it. But I think back in the day when this was done, there were very few inkers that were tracers, because pencil pages were produced so quickly, and they were produced quite loosely in some cases, and inkers had to apply their own artistic talents, not just tracing, but actually bringing the pages to life. And there were a lot of great artists who were inkers, people like Joe Sinnott being one of them. There are really great inkers out there who are great artists in their own right. And obviously that's a way in as well. A lot of people started as inkers and went on to be pencilers. However, always remember that an inker is not merely a person who traces a pencil drawing. See, I didn't read this. The inker has to be an artist himself or herself, no chauvinists say. A gifted inker can make mediocre penciling look great, while a mediocre inker can make great penciling look dull. That's so true. Inking is vitally important. The more you know about it, the better. And here's where it begins. Right, so this part is about traditional inking. Inking can tend to be tiresome, and it requires relentless concentration. It does. Therefore, you should make sure your posture is correct. So they're basically talking about how how you sit, how you apply yourself to your board. They're also talking about tools here. This is something, like I say, I'm not here to read through the entire book for you guys. You've got to go out and buy this book yourself. It's a fabulous book. And even though we're 40 years or something since this was published, this is still very, very relevant for those people, this particular bit for those people that are inking traditionally, but all of it is just so relevant to producing comic book pages. So here we come. Your best bet is to become equally facile with both pen and brush. It makes it important. They're talking about an ink pen here, not a fine line or a brush pen. The pen is easiest when you're just inking black lines, but you'll need a brush for filling in solid black areas, of course. You can also use your brush for drawing lines, but it's more difficult than with the pen. It requires greater control on your part. The lines must be clean, sharp and decisive, not ragged or scratchy. That's changed. That's obviously a very much a Bronze Age Marvel thing, because styles they're not just about the artistic approach, but also about how you draw your line. So not necessarily the case. Still, we suggest you learn to use a brush. Learn to virtually draw with your brush instead of merely tracing the pencil lines. You should feel you're creating them anew with the brush. Feel that you're drawing them, otherwise the finished drawing may seem stiff and lifeless. And that's something that's very important, is to try and not to lose as much of the energy as you can from your pencils through into your inks, or if you're inking somebody else's work, because it is easy to lose along the stages. Notice the patches of design below. They were done with Winsor Newton number 3 sable hair brush. Patches 1 through 4 are called feathering. So they're basically going through and showing you the different techniques of brushes and pens and what have you. Again, I'm not going to read all the way through this. This is stuff you can find out for yourself by buying this book, because it's a fabulous book. This bit is far more pertinent. Here's a well-inked panel shown the size it was originally worked on, and then reduced to the size it would appear in a comic book, so that you can see how well it reproduces even when scaled down to comic book panel size. Notice how the lines vary in thickness, and how they're heavier on the underside of the bodies, away from the light, giving solidity to the figures. Also note how clear the picture is, even though there are many figures and a wealth of detail. One of the most important tasks the inker faces is to ensure that the drawing will be understandable to the reader, no matter how complicated it may be. One way to achieve this is to use heavy blacks to make the figures stand out from the background, as in this example. Line weight is key to everything. Obviously, spot blacks are really important. Shade is really important. But being able to, for instance, address subtle light sources by having just a thicker line on one side of the body, limb, whatever it might be, than the other, that's hugely important, because you don't want to be putting too much black down, because then it'll become very dark and you won't be able to see what's going on. This is a fantastic example here. And then, as I was saying, with too much black, here we've taken the same panel and overworked it. It used too many blacks and too many lines. Notice how complicated it looks in its original size, and how much less clear it is, how much more difficult to understand after it's been reduced to comic book panel size. Adding too many details and too much texture in the inking has made the figures blend with the background instead of standing out in sharp relief as the penciler intended. In short, the picture has become much harder to read, less pleasant to look at, and will also be more difficult to colour. That's the other aspect of this, is bearing in mind colour. So this is totally overworked, and it's just you can see by having too much in it, it's become confusing. And then we go on to the last one, and this is almost as confusing as the darker one, simply because there's no line weight differential in it, which I presume is exactly what he's going to say here. Using the same pencil drawing, once again we go to another extreme. This time the inker didn't get nearly enough variety in his lines, or on the blackness areas. As you can see, the lines are almost all the same weight, with no feeling of thick or thin, and so there's no feeling of depth either. And so you can see that between the three, and how good that one is. But it also makes a difference to colour. I see some artists not having an awful lot of line weight in their work and relying on the colour. And I think what it is that there are some styles, for instance, you take a Disney style, a classic Disney style, which is just like a black line and then the colour inside it. There's still a line weight differential, even though it's very simple lines and very economical. There's still line weight differential, and just because you're blocking in the colours there doesn't mean that's going to work for, you know, inking like this. So be careful with that. If you've got a lighter style, as in you don't want to put too much down, you know, be careful that it's still just not going to work. You know, even if you colour this up completely, it would still be flat. It still wouldn't work that well. The other thing that I will obviously prerequisite this with is this is definitely a type of comic book art. There are so many different types of comic book art out there that are totally valid in their own way, that just this advice, this approach to just doesn't work with. There is no right and wrong to telling stories, but if you're going to go this approach, if you're going to go this classic Bronze Age, classic, you know, superhero sci-fi way of producing your comic books, then this book, its advice about all kinds of things from structure, anatomy, design, everything down into the inks is important, and you must have this book. You must have this book on your desk. If you decide that you're going to go another route, a completely different route, it's still worth having a book like this so that you can see what you're differentiating your own work against, the kind of styles that you're looking to be different from. So here we go. So there's some examples of some superb inking. This one here is just lovely. Sometimes a pencil indicates in his pencil drawings where the black areas should go. Other times he leaves it to the inker. However, no matter how the decision is arrived at, the important thing is to know that when and where to place your strong black. For too little or too much black can weaken or totally destroy a pencil drawing. While the black masses of course give a drawing solidity, they also help focus important elements in a picture by attracting the eye toward any desired area. Equally important is the use of solid and strong black masses to create dramatic moods within the drawing. Now let's go study some examples. So this is a really nice example. Notice how the heavy blacks here are concentrated on just one side of the figure. There are almost no blacks in the light area on the other side. This technique serves to accomplish two things. It gives the figure a feeling of dimension, of roundness, and it directs the reader's attention to the character's head by framing the head with massive areas of black, directing the reader's eye to the all-important fearful face. And that's an important thing to see. It's like we talk about knowing the rules, understanding the rules and getting them right. So for instance, shade and light sources and stuff like that. Now technically, if all that light is coming from behind the figure and all the black is in front of the figure, I don't know that you'd actually see that face at all. So the rules have been broken here by following another rule. The other rules that they have is this spot black and making the panel dynamic. So at the end of the day, you understand the rules and break them in the appropriate way to give you the best final outcome for your panel or your page. And that's a classic example of how to do that properly. This again, you know, looking at these two images up the top here, if that was really the case, that shadow was going across that guy, he'd be in black. You wouldn't be able to see his coat. I'm just about to read it on the left here, but you wouldn't be able to see his coat. It would all be in darkness. But they're popping it out. They're cheating. They're bending those rules in order to make a fantastic panel. Now let's analyse two more typical panels through the use of simplified diagrams. In the top panel, the artist's main purpose was to create a mood of fear and menace. Once again, notice how boldly and simply he's applied the black masses. The heavy shadow seems to equally engulf the smaller white figure, which is sharply highlighted for maximum emphasis. In the corresponding panel on the right, we reduce the entire design to its simplest form so that you can easily discern the crisp contrast between the stark black and white values, and you can see just why it's popping in this very basic format. Now, this is obviously something some people I know do this. I don't do this. It's kind of lay down this whole design of how the blacks will sit and what have you. I tend to just go with it, and it's a combination of things. I think also experience sometimes gives you that ability to just go with the flow, and also, in all fairness, digital work means that you can change it up. If you don't like it, it's fairly easy to change it and go, oh, right, I'd prefer my blacks to be here. So here's some more examples. Here's a different application of blacks. On the previous page, we saw the black area used in a very realistic way, even though the white was popping out. Here we have an example of blacks being used decoratively. Notice how the black highlight lines on the ship seem to be aimed directly at the figures, focusing the reader's attention on Reed, Sue and the baby. Notice also how the blacks in the upper areas of the bodies encircle the three heads, directing your eye right to the cluster of faces. Now, I don't know how much of that is accidental, but it certainly is doing what they're saying it's doing. This bottom panel, I think, is an amazing panel. You can see you can almost sense the light coming out of the screens and hitting the guys that are looking at them in the face. The deep black on the right hand side of the top guy's face. Never add blacks merely because you've got some extra ink on your pen or brush. That's a good thing. Always have a definitive reason, either to enhance the design of the panel or to help clarify a complicated layout. Or equal importance, of course, is the use of black to emphasize a certain mood. And speaking of mood, there you go. This is this. I mean, what a fantastic panel that is. It's just superb work. And then, of course, they've got some some letra tone or whatever it is that they've laid down on top, just to add in that extra level of depth. And it's just superb. So we're going on to some more. He really gone to town on this inking section. How lucky can we be? Here's a perfect example of use of blacks to create a certain mood. So you can see the mood here, and it's pretty much like the previous panel. You've got that. You've created dark in the right hand side. You're looking out of a window or through bars or whatever it is, and you've got that close-up image of the statue, and it just works. The large vertical lines, black designs with fence bars, are also tremendously important in this illustration, for they serve to unify the entire picture. Without them, the whole design would seem to fall apart. Exactly. You'd think, well, whereabouts is that statue in reference to the house and the car there? But of course, line thickness, line weight also is very important. And in the panel below, we have an entirely different feeling here. In order to dramatise the mood of the panel, the black designs seem to be jumping all over the place, creating a scene of chaos and action. But even here, note that the pattern, though seemingly jumpy, is also quite unified and consistent, helping to rivet the reader's eye to the action within the picture. And yeah, I think that's just a well done piece. For our final two examples, notice how this first picture is handled with extreme realism. The light is obviously coming from the left, casting everything on the right in deep shadow. See how the heavy black shadow areas emphasize the feeling of horror story. You know it isn't a humour strip or a romance just by looking at the design of the panel. Also observe the way the black areas in the background give a feeling of authenticity and detail without detracting from the two important figures themselves. The panel is heavy, it's lush, it's melodramatic, and yes, it's clear and compelling. In a word, it's Marvel, and it is. I mean, look at the amount of depth they've got there. If you compare that to the initial shots we looked at, where we were comparing, too much ink, not enough ink, this is just the right amount. You've got depth, you've got shade, but at the same time, it's not overdone. It's clearly seen. And now let's consider the bottom panel. Notice how the large black areas on the building seem to point directly to the most important element, which is of course Spider-Man, and that is true though. All uptick there in the panel works. In summation, the penciler draws his panels in pencil, and then they must be finished by the inker. And as you can see, it is up to the inker to decide where and how boldly to apply his black ink. The inker figures very importantly in determining the mood, the design, and the clarity of each panel. Thus, when you study a comic book's artwork, you must always be conscious of two elements: the basic pencil drawing and the inked version. Together they add up to a completed illustration which is proudly presented to marvelled and assembled. So that's it. That's the end. That's the last chapter. Just before I go into the final sign off, I'll quickly flick through some of my samples. As you can see here, I've done something almost similar. It's not quite the same. Picking out the surfer here in the middle panel from the left panel with line thickness and weight, and you can see him popping from there. But then you add to that something that's digital by knocking back the city behind. You've popped them out even further. So there's so many different ways that you can approach that. This is quite a rough pencil. So, for instance, I'm doing my own artwork here. I'm penciling for my own inks. So you don't have to put a huge amount of detail in if you're confident exactly the way you're going to ink afterwards. Sometimes I like to put more detail in because I don't want to be thinking about the form while I'm inking. I just want to literally just like trace over the top of what I'm doing. But it varies depending on the kind of work that I'm producing, and also how quickly I need to produce it as well. That's another fairly loose pencil there. There's not a lot in the way of shade in there. It's all just like the basic outlines of where everything should go, and then I've added in the light source and the shade that's produced from it, and the background at the top. Here's a page from Only Death Can Save Us. As you can see, I've gone a little bit further with these pencils, and again, it's because I want to nail it down. I want to get it just right so that when I go to inking, I can literally just kind of flow over the top of it. Still, I'm still making some black and white decisions. Popping those blacks in, but a lot more detail there. And now this is Doctor Who. This is somewhere between the two. So I do put some shade in, but I leave a lot of it off. Once I got to this, I think I was about I think this was sort of 3/4 of the way through my run on Doctor Who. At this point, the people that were checking off the BBC and my editor and what have you had got completely used to my style, so I didn't need to have to fill in very, very detailed pencils. So these are fairly straightforward pencils, but as you can see, the blacks filling in there, especially in the space section, and then on her hair and within her clothes. So that's the way that worked. So those are samples, so you can see how inking can be applied to your own pencils. I'm going to wrap up here with the final page from this absolutely wonderful book, and from two geniuses of the comic book world, John Buscema and of course Stan Lee. Well, that wraps it up for now, gang. Naturally, we've only been able to scratch the surface of this fascinating, almost limitless subject, and it is. However, we hope that that in these all too brief pages, we've been able to give you a valuable and informative overview of what it takes to draw your 4 comic books. All anyone can really do is point the way, give you a few tips, a few suggestions. The hard work, alas, must be done by you. And yet, the beautiful thing about being a comic book artist, even about striving to be one, is that you have to love it in order to want to do it. Nobody gets into this field because someone else advised it, or because it seemed like a practical thing to do. Being a comic book illustrator is being engaged in a labour of love. And when you really enjoy what you're doing, that's almost reward enough. Not quite. At any rate, we've told you all we can, at least for now. In this, the first volume of its type ever published, you've gained some insight into what's required of the comic book artist, and you've learned the types of things you must master in order to make the grade. The rest is up to you. One last word before we turn you loose to unleash your talent upon the breathlessly waiting world. To be a great singer, you've got to sing. To be a great pianist, you've got to play piano. And to be a great artist, and Marvel isn't interested in any other kind, you've got to draw, wherever you go, whatever you do, wherever you have a spare minute, draw. Sketch everything you see around you, sketch your friends, your enemies, relatives, strangers, anyone with and everyone. Become as facile with a pencil, pen or brush as you are with a knife and fork. The more you draw, the better you'll be. And we want you to be the best. Excelsior. So that's encapsulated all the advice that any artist could ever give out. Is you just got to keep drawing, keep practicing, keep going, and learn the rules so that you can break them. No matter what your style, learn about form, about the real world. Draw from life wherever possible as practice. And just keep drawing, keep practicing. That 10,000 hour rule, that really is the thing. So that's it from me. If you've been watching the series, hopefully I've convinced you to go out and buy the book if you don't already have the book. Hopefully seeing my examples where I've used this advice for my own work has helped in some way. Just go out, get the book, make sure it's there, and always use it. There are other fabulous books out there. Do try as many as possible, but this one has something of a core to it that can't be beaten in my view. So thanks very much for following along with the series. You can find me at russleach.com or comicbookblackbelt.com. Obviously, I'm here on YouTube as Comic Book Black Belt. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot that people subscribe and want to listen to me and look at my work. If not, why not? Subscribe now. Give the video a like and share it about. That really helps. You can also find out more about my upcoming book if you're watching this before the launch, which is Only Death Can Save Us. You can find out all about that at onlydeathcansaveus.com. There is a link to the Indiegogo campaign, which at the time of filming this video is currently in pre-campaign, so you sign up for an email list. You can also get me on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm over on Parlay, I think it's called, and also on Instagram as well. If you give me a follow over there, I'm constantly putting up latest images from my work. So that's about it for this series and for this video. Once again, thank you so much for joining me on this. I'll be back with another video again in the dojo real soon. Bye bye. Thanks for watching Comic Book Black Belt. If you've enjoyed the content from this video, please like, share or subscribe and come over and follow me on Twitter. It's been great having you in the dojo. See you again soon.